The USS Nimitz carrier strike force, currently deployed in the South China Sea, punctuates the political risks in the Asia-Pacific in 2023. As lingering tensions over Taiwan and North Korea potentially escalate, Russia's war in Ukraine reminds many that this region is not safe from a military escalation. This as China carries out its own exercises in the same waters as the Nimitz, led by its newest carrier, the Shandong. China and the U.S. are simultaneously flexing their muscles.
The USS Nimitz may be the oldest aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy, but it still does its job of projecting U.S. strength here in the Western Pacific. 0 to 120 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds.
While the U.S. has 11 active aircraft carriers, no other nation has more than 2, including China. But both the U.S. and China have many more on the drawing board, as the U.S. upgrades to Ford-class supercarriers, and China reportedly aims for a global blue water navy by next decade.
What's concerning, I think, is not so much the changes in capability, it's the intent and, crucially, the perceptions of intent. So both sides see themselves as responding to the other's aggression, and that's a classic recipe for a cycle of escalation.
U.S. Carrier Strike Force 11 Commander Rear Admiral Christopher Sweeney met with us on the bridge of the Nimitz, off camera, saying his mission is to show the flag, an assurance to allies the U.S. will be here when the time is needed.
We're set up for the vulnerability of a military mistake. When there's no trust, there's no communication between nations. When you have 2 fighter jets flying closely in the air, as we did very recently over the South China Sea, that could escalate very quickly.
And yet, the likely cause of any U.S.-China military conflict may be less accidental and more political or economic.
The next decade is probably the more dangerous one in terms of, big sort of grand geostrategic rolls of the dice by China or something like that. The long-term balance of power is extremely dependent on how both the US and others and China manage their economies.
The U.S. has assiduously denied that there's any intent to contain China, but actions speak louder than words. We have a containment policy. The Biden administration followed up with these draconian export sanctions on advanced semiconductor chips. We have certainly taken actions that put enormous pressure on China, and it's naive of us to think that China will not respond.
For now, the shows of force continue, but for us, it's time to leave this soon-to-be decommissioned Nimitz on an also aging C-2 Greyhound transport, catapulted off over these disputed waters. Stephen Engle, Bloomberg News in the South China Sea.